right. So for this week, we're going to do something a little different. And I'll give Tyson the credit for being ambitious about this. We're
Yep.
working on the title for it. We're going to see how we can do it. And don't worry, the Pink Boys you've come to know and love is still around, and we'll still be doing the typical Pink Boys episodes. But we're going to see if we can go into a direction on some of these where we take deep dives into subjects that we find interesting. And for instance, this video you're watching now is a subject that Tyson finds interesting, and that is different what happens to our souls into the afterlife. I mean, if you've listened to our podcast, sometimes we talk about paranormal stuff, sometimes we talk about economy, sometimes we talk about politics, sometimes we talk about movies. So maybe this is kind of us taking some of the subjects that we talk about and refining them a lot further, maybe doing more than 2 minutes of homework on them before we talk about them.
It's
and
our
then
first attempt
further.
at like a documentary kind of thing. Just something that we find
Yeah.
interesting. But I just want
Exactly.
to get into it a little bit. I've always, for like past few years, I've always searched on YouTube for a YouTube video where it would explain how each like of the major religions has a perspective on the afterlife. Like, what do Hindus think? What do Muslims think happens after we die? And I've never been able to find a video that explains that succinctly. I'd always have to go to Wikipedia or some other like secondary source. So this is pretty much our attempt at creating the video that we always wanted to see. So we hope that you guys like it, and yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's an interesting choice, Tyson. Full disclosure, I'm relatively religious. I try to be a good Christian. I'm not I try my hardest, we'll just say, as much as a human can. So I find the subject interesting. I remember, it must be more than 12 or 13 years ago now, I read this book called Spooked, I think it's called. And it's about how different cultures it's about how different cultures perceive the afterlife. And I thought one of them was interesting, where the author traveled. We might talk about the overarching religion in India, but there's certain portions of it that believe in reincarnation. She noticed that people treated their lives more carelessly in places where they overwhelmingly believe that reincarnation existed. So I think that the way that we view the afterlife has input on how we live our daily lives. And a lot of the things that people lose track of is the first thing people will say to me, it's like, well, you're just a Christian, or you tell people to be Christian so they don't go to hell. That's not the reason that people are Christians in this life. And I won't get preachy about it or anything like that. But the afterlife is certainly a facet of religion, and almost all religions, that everyone has to take into account. So I find the subject interesting.
Also,
and
maybe it's just me, but I feel like the topic of the afterlife has kind of died down in modern times. Like, I barely hear anyone talk about life after death in our current year, where I would have the assumption that if I go back 100 years, people would always talk about, salvation through God and all that stuff. But you barely hear about that today,
That's because people then were more in touch with their souls and their spirit, and they were less distracted by the world around them and had more time to reflect. So they were more concerned with things with more weight like that, So, but things are a little different now. But I'll just go real quick. The message I'm trying to get across with these episodes, I mean, going forwards, I would like to do one. I know sometimes I bring them up on episodes constantly. I want to do a deep dive into Amazon and talk about why I hate Amazon. I think I might tackle the housing market at some point. So I hope you all come with me on that journey. And Tyson, obviously, you're invited. And hopefully when we do more out there concepts, obviously there's that great video that came out recently of the woman. She didn't even say she saw a lizard person. People just infer that now. But I know we can get Ari back on here to talk about lizard people, so we can do a deep dive on that. I mean, a lot of you haven't read Children of the Matrix by David Icke, and it shows, but That's okay. I did it for you. You don't have to worry about it.
That
But
motherfucking book is not real.
exactly. So I'm gonna jump right into it here. Tyson, do you have anything before we get going on this subject? I hope you got your facts straight about the unprovable afterlife.
Dude,
But
trust me, I did a lot of research on this. But just the general structure that we're going to go through is we're doing Christianity first, then Hinduism, Buddhism, Chinese mythology, Islam, and then followed by Judaism, which will be a banger.
I think that's going to be fun for me because I'm not familiar with the afterlife in a few of those. Buddhism, for instance, I don't know. I don't know what goes on there. I didn't know they even had a perspective on it. So I'm looking forward to the crash course. But I'll start on my end. The one I got, Tyson gave me my homework, which I studied diligently for. I already knew a little bit on it already, but we'll start with the Mac Daddy of afterlives, the OG afterlife. It's not the oldest religion in the world, but it probably is the oldest fully recorded one, is Christianity. Some people, man, it's tough to connect all of this together because it's hard to match what's biblically accurate as far as the afterlife. And there's pocket verses that reference to burning. There'll be no rest. There'll be no peace. There'll be no moments of clarity where you're able to function as a human being. It sounds like even within the few verses that describe hell in the Bible, it's just constant torture. But that's also kind of at odds with the normal depiction of Christianity that people imagine, which was from Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy. What was it? Dante's Inferno, which is a classic that a lot of people have read, where there's 9 rings of hell. And I think the bottom rung of hell is reserved for the worst offenders, such as, I think it's betrayers, like Judas, I think is at that bottom layer of hell. And also, I love Dante. I think the other one who's down there is the Pope that excommunicated him or something. I forget what Dante
who else is there?
it?
It's the guy that killed Caesar, Brutus, because the guy that wrote the Divine Comedy was like a massive simp for Caesar. So he put that guy down to the lowest level.
That's so fun. I know, it's great because we talk about how it's just bizarre and surreal these people are who do something like a Vampire Diaries fan. What's the 50 Shades of Grey came from Vampire Diaries, or not Vampire Diaries, Twilight fan fiction. What's the difference between that and Dante Alighieri? It's like, oh, by the way, that guy that I hate, he's in the 9th layer of hell as well. He's just way down there. Obviously, it wasn't meant to be a literal depiction of what he imagined hell to be as. It was more allegorical in his descriptions. But to me, it's a little refreshing if hell were to be like that. So if you're bad, but not that bad, you're not going to be, in the belly of the beast for all eternity. I mean, getting denied. It's so funny. It's like he's such a loser. He's like talking about hell like it's a video game.
The
it's like,
funniest thing
it's
is
like Doom.
The funniest thing is that in the Divine Comedy, Dante Alighieri like sucks himself off quite a bit as well. Like he'll stumble across some people in hell, and then the people will be like, "Wait, are you the Dante Alighieri?" And he'd be like, "Yes, indeed."
Oh my gosh! Honestly, that's a glimpse into me if I wrote about myself. There is some narcissism poking out there from Dante, if nobody could tell. It's actually, and I'm not sure which predates the other, but there's this church that not many people know about. It's an offshoot of Christianity called the Swedenborg Church, started by this man, Emanuel Swedenborg, who is the last living polymath in recorded history. And obviously a polymath is someone who's gifted in almost all academic facets of life. Think about someone on the level of, who's the guy that they made Assassin's Creed 2 after, that did all the flying wooden
Ezio?
planes and all. Think simpler than that. He did flying wooden planes. The name's
Da Vinci.
Yeah, exactly. That's an example of a polymath. So Emanuel Swedenborg started this church. He originally wrote books about iron metals for some reasons. Vastly intellectual man. And his idea of heaven is that it's 3 levels. There's 1 level for normal people. Hey, I made it to heaven. This is great. Think of the Windows XP background and open fields, And then the level 2 is people who are academics, people who want to study the word and the soul and gain more knowledge through what they can learn further about the divine. And then the third is for real MFers, like the spiritual kings whose souls have passed knowledge. They've passed the basic necessities of man. And these are chosen people by God that fulfilled his word in a way that can't really be subscribed or comprehended by human beings. And I always thought, I think it's strange to split up heaven like that, but I think it's the concept itself is interesting, and it's kind of, to me, not inverse, but a different version of, hey, there's 9 levels of hell, like Dante Alighieri says, but also the Swedenborgian concept of heaven has 3 levels, which is like it's like a video game almost. Like, these guys are so ridiculous when they're talking about these things, especially since they're extrapolating so much, because he would supposedly go into trances and like talk to his dual outer body, which visited heaven and would tell him these things. Really interesting guys. So read into Emanuel Swedenborg when you have the chance. But let's retract and speak much, much broader. In the Christian sense, getting to heaven is split into 2 ideas centered around repenting and believing that Jesus Christ came to forgive all the sins on earth and died on the cross collectively to forgive man's sins. And in order to attain salvation, you fulfill life by saying Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, or living a life filled with works and fulfilling those works to be able to go to heaven. Now, Protestant Christians only believe that you need to confess you believe in Christ with your lips and honestly believe it. And let's not say it's a get out of jail free card, but in a lot of senses it is. And Catholics, and to a degree, Orthodox Church believes that not only do you have to accept Christ, but you also have to live a godly life and find repentance for your own worldly sins, which I'm starting to get more on that team day by day. I'm a very Protestant Christian. I was raised in churches with bands and pastors and weird youth group leaders and things like that.
Christian rap groups.
Yeah, well, there is. I talked about that infamous Chick-fil-A video that makes me angry. I found out that rapper was this guy named Lecrae, was getting his shoes shined by the Chick-fil-A CEO. He's like a Christian rapper. It's amazing to hear. So, but conceptually, you could really boil it down to being in heaven is being with God in his kingdom, with God and his angels, and then being in hell is complete separation from God. Now, that's really open to interpretation, so I find it hard to believe that hell is this picture where it's you just burning and going, which happens at the end of the first Tales from the Hood movie. These 3 gangsters find out they're actually in hell the entire time, and they're like, waving back and forth.
Wait, really? Part of me sounds so Kino. Holy shit.
To me, it's just, I would imagine separation from God just feels like loneliness. It just feels like you're just alone and away from God. And I remember I had a pastor at church that said at one time, if you're going to hell, being on earth is the closest to God you'll ever be. And if you're going to heaven, being on earth is the furthest from God you'll ever be. And I don't know. I thought that was an interesting point that kind of went across. But a lot of things about being a Christian, and I don't mean this to be a 101 or anything like that. It's about living a godly life and not giving into the temptations that life gives you and living like Christ. That has nothing to do with heaven and hell. That has to do with the here and now and life on earth. People think that heaven and hell is just the end game for every Christian, and they're Christians out of fear. And it's more about getting the most out of a godly life you can now. Now, the thing that I think is interesting, and I think Tyson, this kind of this, you might think this is your way out, is that Catholics believe in this thing called purgatory, which is if you're a righteous soul, where let's say maybe you didn't fulfill the works. Yeah, I think that might be where you land. We'll see. But if you're not doing the best you can through works in life, not that you rebuked God or anything, but you've kind of wavered in your ways. Some would say if you're not Catholic, you'll end up in purgatory and you have to get prayed out of purgatory by other Catholics. It's kind of this in-between phase where it's not a great place to be. It's certainly not heaven, but it's not the worst of hell, but it's just a place where your soul is kind of in flux before it's able to find salvation and penance through people on earth to grant you access into heaven. So Tyson, if you meet an untimely death, I think that's where I need to get you out of. we'll turn the podcast into a purgatory prayer session for Tyson. Just 20 minutes.
Listen,
Lord
like,
God, please. I know Tyson's in there. Please.
I already know for a fact that I'm not going to make it to heaven on the first go. So just stick me in purgatory, and I'll just work my way up there eventually.
I love that you're just making a deal with God. You're like, listen, God, I know heaven's not gonna happen, but I'm trying here. I'm a little late to the game, but I'm doing my absolute best.
Yep.
So yeah, and then it gets kind of confusing too, because heaven isn't always going to be the way that it is now when the new covenant's fulfilled and there's a judgment day on earth. This is some real Revelations end time stuff. Then the structure of heaven and its relationship to earth will change. It'll be foundationally different, and we'll be living on a new earth supposedly and a new heaven afterwards. And that's just some of the small things within Christian faith that kind of stick out to me about heaven. It's the acts that you need to do to get there, and it's basically confessing that Christ is your Lord, and that seems to be the starting point of getting to heaven, which is being near God. So it's pretty, like, when you talk about the afterlife, I think this is the one that resonates with people the best, because it seems simple. Do good deeds, believe in the right person, go to heaven. Don't do good deeds, believe in the wrong person, go to hell. I won't get into that boring contradiction that people try and say, like, what about people who live on an island that have never heard of God? Well, do they just go to hell automatically? That's just boring conceptually, and that can be explained away by scripture. In fact, you could just throw a purgatory on that one. You know what I mean? Yep. So it's you're like, yep, I'll see them, clean them on up.
The people of like North Sentinel Island, like the
yes,
the uncontacted tribe. I'll see all those people in purgatory along with me.
You're gonna get to purgatory and see a guy with a large disc in his upper lip, like Wakanda guy, be like, oh, and you're like, yeah, I know, dude, I'm here too. So let's hope they get to praying down there. Well, there's actually a guy. It's funny you say that. There was a guy that tried to visit that island. He was a missionary, a Christian missionary. I think he was Asian, and he tried to go to the island to tell them about God because he wanted them to believe in Christ, and they just killed him straight up. So, yeah. And dude, like, he's asking for it, man.
I bet even God was like, what's his end game?
God was like, dude, I had them fine in purgatory, because the guy was a steadfast believer. He probably found his way to heaven. So when he got there, he was like, look, that's no good. We don't need you doing that. All right. God's like, I was waiting to see what they did too. I have no idea what those guys are up to. So I don't even mess with those guys on North Sentinel Island. So, but yeah, I think, look, it's cut and dry. People like to implant a lot of stuff from Dante's Inferno onto heaven and hell and their ideas of it. But in the Bible, you think about things like the devil, the Antichrist, heaven, hell. And I discovered this when I read the Bible in its entirety. All those things that you've come to know about the Bible, they're like a verse or two, a page out of the Bible. The whole story of Adam and Eve is one page out of the Bible, not even. So the book is incredibly dense, and there's a lot to pick out of it. A lot of very boring Hebrew kings and histories of battles in Jerusalem stuff, or Israel or whatever. But as far as the afterlife goes, there's really not too much said about it. It's more about the salvation and what you need to do to get there and what's going on here on earth. But yeah, that's good. That's good enough for me. So you got the big boy out of the way now, Tyson. So we got Christianity. What do you have?
Just a quick note to end on Christianity. In Ezekiel, there's actually a pretty interesting quote, verse that depicts heaven with some specific characteristics, actually.
Okay.
So when Judgment Day happens, God will create Earth 2.0, basically, and he's going to call it New Jerusalem. And it's it's where people who have lived a virtuous life and their souls have gone to heaven is where they're going to be residing post-Judgment Day. And Ezekiel gives some pretty cool characteristics of New Jerusalem. So apparently the city's going to have 12 gates named after the 12 tribes of Israel, each gate guarded by angels. It's going to measure
black 15... Israelis.
Yeah,
they're going to have their own gate.
Yeah, just those guys like roasting each person that comes in.
Yeah. It was a joke. It's a joke.
Yeah, okay, cry, sorry, white boy.
That's right. Sorry, keep going.
Apparently, it's going to be like a 3-dimensional city. So it's going to measure 1,500 miles on its length and width, but also 1,500 miles upwards as well.
Are
So
you
it's going to be
implying heaven is like a 2-dimensional Mario level right now? It's like
no,
we have 3 dimensional.
no. I mean, most cities are 2 dimensional in the sense that they don't really build upwards, but this one it will be
Oh, I
building
get it.
upwards. Yeah,
Oh, okay. I didn't know
the
that. Your
walls.
favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, yep. The walls of New Jerusalem will be made of jasper, and pure gold. The gates will be made of pearls and precious stones. So,
So God's gonna build that wall.
yep. And the coolest thing
Yeah.
is that in the city, there's gonna be no need for a sun or moon to give light because the glory of God's gonna illuminate the entire city. Apparently.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm happy
Yep.
about that one. It's not going to be like in 30 Days of Night where it's cloudy for 30 days at that random time in Alaska and then all those vampires come out. So
Yeah.
that's good. I'm glad to hear that. So Earth 2.0, I'm ready for it. New Jerusalem. Thanks,
Yep.
Tyson,
Yep.
for letting us know. So what do you got? Who's next?
I got Hinduism next. Hinduism's pretty
Eh.
cool. So you mentioned that you didn't hear much about like reincarnation outside of
Mm-mm.
Christianity, and the concept of reincarnation really stems from Hinduism in itself. I think Hinduism dates back to like 3,000 years old, at least 5,000, maybe 3,000 years old.
Really? Okay.
But yeah, but the cycle of reincarnation is called by Hindus as the cycle of samsara, where they believe that the soul of every human is eternal, but whenever they die, the soul passes through different physical bodies. So it's a cycle where you die, your soul transports itself to another body, um, and so on and so on. And the so whatever life that you lead on Earth now, it determines the next life that you're going to lead once you die in this one. So, for example, if you lead a life of sin and not much good deeds, your next life you'll be reincarnated as a lower being of existence. So maybe like an animal, or if you're really bad, like maybe as a fucking insect, right? And if
Yeah.
you're if you're if you've led a life of good karma and good deeds, you will be reincarnated as a higher being, which is mostly human. And then perhaps if you did like a really good life, you'll be born into a life of privilege. Like maybe you'd be born to like
Mm.
rich parents and all that. But between each life, these eternal souls, they go to these temporary realms where you have these temporary heavenly realms and these temporary hellish realms where they sort of like experience the consequences of their actions for their past life, right? So
Huh.
it's kind of like a nice idea. Like you lead like a really virtuous life on Earth, and then you die, and then you go to a temporary heavenly realm for like maybe 1,000 years, and then you get bliss for 1,000 years, and then you reincarnate into a good being of existence.
Into a legend.
Yep, yep.
So you're saying I was a really well-behaved bug in my last life, or what?
No, the bug is all the people that had let a life of sin. So
Oh, okay. It doesn't go the other
yeah,
way then. Okay, I got you. I got you. All
but
right.
but the end goal of Hinduism is so the end goal for Christianity would be salvation through God, right? And the end goal of Hinduism would be this thing called moksha, which is freedom from the cycle of samsara. Essentially, they want to
Mm.
liberate themselves and stop the cycle of reincarnation for themselves.
So that's
So,
like that's called enlightenment, isn't it?
sort
Is that
of,
what enlightenment is basically?
sort of. So Hindus, they don't believe in a singular deity like God. They don't believe like they don't believe that God has a consciousness, or is a sentient being. They sort of believe in this thing called Brahman, which is the universal essence of life. It's a lame comparison, but um, if you know the Flash, he gets his power from like the Speed Force, right? So it's kind of
Sure.
it's kind of like that, where it's like the universal essence of life. And if you achieve Moksha, your soul returns and unifies with the Brahman. It becomes one with the universal essence of life again. Mm.
Okay. That's interesting. Do you believe that cuz I'm only halfway convinced. So because I saw a really interesting show, I forget. It's so long. I think it was called like paranormal. So, I don't know. It was a really good paranormal show that was on for a little while, and it talked about this guy who went through regressive, or I guess I don't know if that term would even be included in it. Reincarnation hypnosis, and he was
Ah.
able to recall things from his past life, and he talked about this portrait of a hunchback baby that he painted in his past life. And he said he was drunk during Mardi Gras one time 20 years after that and stumbled into a gallery that had a picture of a hunchback baby. And then everything from that guy's life, when he looked into that artist's life more, all the things from his regression hypnosis things matched up. And this is 20 plus items. And it always made me think twice about it, right? So who knows? I mean,
Well,
there's tons and tons of stories about that.
here's a pretty interesting story from my personal life. Actually, when my grandma died, um, 2007 or whatever, um, when they were holding her funeral, and this is like well after she already passed away. She passed away like a week before then. But when we were holding her funeral, there was this cricket that was chilling on top of her coffin, and the cricket it literally wouldn't move. Like you know how most bugs are like
Of
jumpy and
course.
they fly off when you get close to them. It was just chilling on the top of this coffin, and then as a joke, my dad and grandpa were saying, "Hey, what if that's her in the next life?" And then they took a picture of the cricket after. So after the funeral, and it was a digital camera, by the way. After the funeral, they looked back at the camera pictures, and every single picture of the funeral was perfectly fine, but the pictures of the cricket were digitally corrupted, so they couldn't be recovered.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
So some
interesting.
some would say that that was my grandma's next life, and she was given a brief moment of sentience of her memories to just to have
To
closure,
go
I
to her
guess.
funeral?
Yep, yep.
That sounds like something that would never be said at a funeral in the West. So that is certainly interesting. Yeah, well, a lot of people do the classic. Did you ever hear that story about that guy who said he was a World War II pilot and he was able to match up everything from his life? I've heard that one a million times. So, but yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I think it's a good subject. So, do you
Yeah.
believe in it?
Um, I don't really know, but I it would be kind of nice because I don't think my state of mind is ready to leave the cycle of Moshka or the cycle of samsara yet, if it does exist, right? I think I still like existing. I still prefer being alive. I don't really want to unify with like the universal life force yet, so I think I'm down to chill on Earth for a lot longer.
I like being alive too a little bit. So
Yeah.
no, I'm totally with you on that one. Well, there's early versions. Well, I don't even know how to say this. It's called Gnosticism. Gnosticism and Gnostic Christianity had ideas of reincarnation, but that's when you kind of enmesh Eastern philosophy into Christian philosophy, and it gets a little bumpy. So there's probably some guys we know that are on board with things like that. So you got another one?
Yeah, yeah. So, kind of along the same vein is Buddhism. So, Buddhism it split off from Hinduism a couple thousand years ago, and it has a lot of the same concepts, but there are a few fundamental differences, right? So, I think that the key difference is that Hinduism believes in an eternal and unchanging soul. So your
Hmm.
physical body it doesn't really represent who you are. It's just a vehicle for your soul. The Buddhists, on the other hand, they don't believe in that. They don't believe in the how should I how should I put this? They don't believe in a permanent self, um, and they don't distinguish between the consciousness and the soul. So they think that whatever you're consciously experiencing, that is your soul. There's nothing internal inside, and whatever consciousness your next life has, that's going to be a new soul, if that makes
So
sense.
we're defined by our consciousness,
Yes.
really,
So
and our
so Hinduism
conscious
Hinduism
awareness.
separates consciousness and the soul. So for example, someone could be um someone could be in a coma, but they would still say that that person's soul is still within them. There's an essence within them that is of their character. Buddhists, on the other hand, they tie consciousness with the soul, and they say, yeah, the cycle of reincarnation exists, but because your memories are wiped each time, your soul, which is your consciousness, gets renewed and renewed.
Oh, I'm not a
Yeah.
fan of that. I feel like that means you can't have a collective experience for your conscious that you kind of take with you everywhere. Like I'm assuming when I get to heaven someday, I'm gonna remember everything I did down here.
Yeah,
So, like I'm hopeful when I get to heaven someday, all the questions I have about life, I'm able to have answered up there. All the things in my life that I never quite figured out, all the people that might have been involved with it, I never understood why they did the things that they did. Like, I'm hoping that when I get, oh, man, talk about a narcissist. I'm hoping when I get to heaven someday, it's a replay of my life, and I'm able to see things that I never thought
the
before.
greatest
Why I
hits
did the
falling.
things. Yeah, be like, well, there's a thing on ESPN. It's called like behind the whatever. It's something. It's just like behind the 30 for 30 and whatever. So it's all about like the a recounting of someone's sports career or something like
Yeah,
that. So it'd be like mine, like an interview or something. But
I
instead it'd
guess.
probably be like God being like, dude, why'd you do this, this, and
Yeah,
this?
yeah.
Like, come on now. Like
I guess the best way to describe how Buddhists see things, they kind of view human experience as like water flowing under a bridge, right? It's it's impermanent, it's ever changing, it's uh, it's the essence of like non-existence, right? And that ties into like what their perception is of moksha as well. So as I described before, in Hinduism, to gain enlightenment is to free yourself from the cycle of reincarnation, which means you
mm.
reunify with the universal life force. In Buddhism, it you attain that enlightenment by understanding the true nature of reality. So once you totally
Ah.
understand how the self is non-existent and you transcend all human attachments and human concepts conditioned into you, then you can reunify with the non-existence of reality, if that makes any sense.
Woo, well, I'm hoping someone out there got that one because you got a little over my head there, but it sounded right. It sounded pretty good.
Yeah,
So
I'm gonna be honest. I kind of hope this isn't right. This would be kind of depressing if this.
I feel like we're doing a game show with religions. It's like, and you are the weakest link. I'm sorry. What is it? What was it? Buddhism, Hinduism? Yeah, get out of
Yeah,
here. We're no good with that. We'd rather roll the
Hinduism sounds
dice.
based, but I don't know about Buddhism, man. I kind of like existence. I don't want it.
Well, that's always my biggest fear about the afterlife is that it is nothing, but you still retain your conscious, so you just stare into darkness forever. That's what I, for some reason, feel like my worst. Which maybe that is hell. Then maybe that is hell, there's no hope of fixing it from that point because a lot of the typical. Let's just say agnostic, maybe, well, definitely atheist idea is that because the neurons in your brain are done firing, then you cease to exist, like when you were non-existing before you were born, right? So that what you're talking about with what was it, Buddhism? That kind of seems
Yeah,
like a
Buddhism.
weird, yeah, that seems like a strange version of that, where you're like ceasing to exist because you've reached some type of oneness with the universe. That goes into Mother Gaia bullshit territory, and I've never been a fan of that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah,
um, but I'll keep moving along. Is it my turn? I like
I
this
think it is your turn.
actually.
Yeah.
I'm having a little bit of fun. I can't wait till we do it with a subject that makes me angry. This is just more fun. So, it doesn't take much to get me there. But so you talked about Buddhism, right? And what
And
was the other
Hinduism,
one?
yeah.
Hinduism, right? So I'm going to move into and forgive me if I'm not hitting all the points here on Chinese mythology. So a lot of people would think that is Buddhism or Hinduism or something like that, but this is the more deeply rooted cultural religion of China. Is this the same thing along the lines of, they have the calendar, year of the rat, that kind of stuff? Is that a Chinese mythology, or is that
That is
something
Chinese
else?
mythology, yeah.
Okay, so that would be Taoism then, correct?
Yep.
Or no?
There's three main religions in China:
Mhm.
Taoism, Confucianism, and Chinese Buddhism. But Taoism is like the oldest one. It's like indigenous to China.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it kind of it's funny when I think about this. So Taoism seems similar to Hinduism and Buddhism, where the universe does not have sentience, but it's more like a fundamental force that guides us and shapes the universe. And now I'm really starting to see how George Lucas is a complete hack and got the idea for the Force in Star
Yep.
Wars, because that is quite literally he literally just took Western screen typing and shots and movie shots and combined it with the writing of Taoism, and then said,
Yep.
"Here's your movie." I guess it's a Chinese mythology Western in space, but again, even in that sense, it's creative. So, so
Bravo, Lucas.
one of the facets of Taoism is, and a lot of people would know this, is the yin and the yang, which is actually kind of similar. If anyone's ever read St. Augustine's Confessions, before he became a Christian, he was into this religion called Manichaeism, which is this battle between darkness and light that goes on throughout life, where darkness tries to envelop light and light tries to envelop dark, and you can't have one without the other. And to me, that kind of sounds like the yin and the yang, where the yin represents darkness, femininity, passivity, coolness, and receptivity, aka me. And the yang, light, masculinity, activity, warmth, and creativity. Okay, and these two things, you can't have one without the other, and they mix together and they create this force within. I guess it would be the universe, or the sentience of the universe, and they're interconnected parts of the Tao, and the interaction between these two forces creates cycles and transformations of existence. And I'm assuming that part of our lives intersects with this life force upon death, and we become part of it. So within the yin and the yang, and within Taoism, there's three realms. There's the earthly realm, which is the physical world that we're all in. And then there's the human realm, which is the metaphysical relationship between all of us, where we can harmonize with each other and gain spiritual transcendence. Man, I sound like that lady, Marianne Williamson, who ran for president of the U.S. And this is where we meet our inner mother and expose ourselves to the spirit of the earth.
And then we hold the crystal up, and then we charge up the energy in the crystal.
Yep. And then finally, my girlfriend will come back to me. And the earthly realm, human realm, and then the heavenly realm, which is the highest level of existence. And this is so. Would this heavenly realm in Chinese mythology, does that have some sort of mythological Greek gods or anything like that? Or do they have a god, or is it just becoming one with the universe?
So you know how I mentioned like the end goal of Hinduism is like you transcend the cycle of reincarnation and you become one with like the universal force, right?
Yeah.
In Chinese mythology, it's a limited form of reincarnation until you gain enough like experience within your soul, and then you transcend and you become immortal, and then you live in the heavenly realm. So it's kind of like a mix
Mm.
between the Western idea of the afterlife with the Eastern idea from Hinduism.
Ah, okay. And it seems like to kind of run through this cycle and attain this oneness with the universe, you have to cultivate virtue, understand the presence of Tao in all things. This is literally Star Wars. I'm sorry. The Chinese mythology stole from it. Seeking harmony with the universe, transforming one's. You know what though? You know what I said that was kind of, and I'm really not trying to sound racist, I swear. You know what, though? What I said earlier about that book Spooked, where the way people view the afterlife or religion it kind of transcribes into the way they live life within their culture. You can
Uh-huh.
tell. And I don't know if this is just with Asian cultures in general, but in China, everyone seems more united towards a singular vision than democratic, uh, I don't want to say, let's say democratic, liberty-minded narratives that are in the West. I feel like China has this cultural cohesion to be one with themselves and their culture around them, and that kind of might be a byproduct of adhering to the Tao and Chinese mythology. They seem to place a lot of value on being interconnected as opposed to not. Whereas it seems like in the West, where we lean on heaven and hell, it's a lot focused on oneself and oneself's deeds they do in their life and how they're how it affects the world instead of a collective's deeds on life or their
That's a
interaction
good
with a
point.
consistent consciousness. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good point. It's like in Chinese mythology, there you you start off with the assumption that, okay, well, there's this force, there's this heavenly realm where I have to work with others and integrate myself into the universe to even access that realm in the first place. But I feel like when you talk about salvation from a Christian perspective, it's all very individual. Like everyone has their own journey towards salvation. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally know what you mean. So Chinese mythology, a lot more interesting than I thought. I thought it was just, oh, it's the year of the pig. Oh, it's the year of the rat. So
Okay.
I'll take it. Sorry, is that a mean thing to say? I don't
No,
know.
that's fine.
People disparage my religion all the time, so I have to get over it. All right. So yeah, you're up. Who do you got there, Kit?
All right, dude. This is a friggin' banger. So, Islam, they believe in this transitory realm called the barzakh. Right, when someone dies, their soul leaves the body and goes to this like containment realm called the barzakh, and all souls stay there until Judgment Day.
Damn,
But
so they're just hanging out?
they're all hanging out. But there's a bit of a difference. So if you did a life of good deeds, you get comfort. But if you did a life of sin, you get punishment. But they're both like taste testing. You know, like those taste testers at Costco where you get like a sample. You get like a sample of comfort and you get a sample of punishment in this realm.
Okay. Yeah. I like it. I like it. Yeah,
Yep,
it's a
yep.
sampler platter at Costco. Okay.
But the main event of Islam is this thing called the Judgment Day, right? Which is actually the end of the world, according to them. So this day of judgment, it's the culmination of human history, where all souls currently in Barzakh and on Earth are going to be pulled and held accountable for how they've led their lives, right? And the Quran, it's given us, it tells us that there are some minor signs and some major signs to look up for to know Judgment Day has arrived. So the minor signs, tell me if you've seen these signs in society today, because I sure have. Moral and social decay, check.
It's a
Widespread
little vague.
corruption, check.
Okay.
Widespread atheism, check.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And abundance of false prophets, which do we have that?
I mean, you probably have one in about every other state. There's this really great show called Deadly Devotion. I highly recommend anyone watches it on Discovery Plus, which is a great streaming platform, by the way. This is not an ad for Discovery Plus. It's just I love ghost shows and I love true crime shows, so that's all I watch on there. And there's a show called Deadly Devotion where it's basically stories of cults where it ends in someone dying or everyone dying. And it always goes the same way. Guy starts an honest Christian cult where 5 or 6 people follow him. He gets more people. He starts having sex with the people's young daughters.
Yep.
Then he declares himself the Messiah. Then everyone dies. That's usually what it comes down to. So yeah, there is a lot of widespread false prophets, and there have been
It's like
over
the false
time.
prophet
So, yeah.
starter kit.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't mean to just give away the game plan right now. Every time I watch it, I'm like, well, all they have to do is get a 6-bedroom house in the middle of nowhere and start reading the Bible every day. And then, hey, they got good setups there as long as they keep the sex with people above 18.
Dude, you got
and don't kill everyone.
That's a good formula.
Yeah, they can chill for life. I don't know why. They always have to they got to go below 18 and they got to call themselves the son of God. It's like, come on, dude. There were 2 things you didn't need to do. There were 2 things you didn't need to do, and you did the both of them every time. But sorry, I didn't mean to fast track you there or to sidetrack you there. But you were talking about widespread corruption and obviously false prophets. And again,
these are like the minor signs that the Judgment Day is coming, but it's also given us some major signs. So the first major sign is the emergence of the false Messiah. So this person will emerge and be known around the world, and they will deceive people with extraordinary powers, and they will claim to be the Messiah, the second coming of God. The second major sign is that Christ himself will come down from heaven, and he will confront this false Messiah and battle him.
Mine?
Yeah,
My
you're
Jesus Christ?
Yep,
Okay.
you're Christ.
All right.
The third.
Did he get traded? Was there a trade deal?
No,
What?
apparently, I didn't realize this, but Islam also believes in the second coming of Christ. But perhaps his mission is a bit edited
I
from what you
I
guys
thought
believe.
Islam had a salary cap or something. I didn't know they were able to take on. Okay, all right, fair enough. No, it's so interesting that Islam and Christianity find so much to fight about yet. Because I have read the Quran in its entirety as well for educational reasons, and they have a lot. They really do have a lot in common. And you know what? They both have a lot in common with. What's the Zoroastrianism with Zarathustra? A lot
Really?
in common with that. Yeah, Zarathustra's story is vaguely. It's like a strange combination of Christ's and Genesis at the same time. It's really
Ah.
interesting. But keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So the third major sign is the appearance of the beast. A mysterious creature known as the beast will emerge and begin to speak to people.
I'm sorry, but
That's
this is sick.
I
This
know
is
it's
way
fucking
cooler than
epic,
I
right?
thought it was.
Yeah.
I thought Islam afterlife was more, or end times was more. Look, if you don't believe in Allah or the word of Muhammad, you're just going to be burning in hell on a slate
Yeah,
forever.
yeah, same.
But there's a
This
lot
is
going on
yeah.
here.
The fourth major sign is that the sun will rise from the west instead of the east. This mark
Whoa.
so the sun rising from the opposite direction of the earth. This marks Allah closing the doors of repentance for humanity. He's Allah saying
Flat Earth
that's it.
confirmed.
Allah saying that's it. No more chance to repent. You've had your time. It's over. And the final,
Wow.
yep, how cool is that, right? It's and then
Fucking legend.
the final major sign is the blowing of the trumpet. So this angel called Israfil is going to blow a trumpet heard around the world, signaling the end of the world, pretty much. So when this angel blows this trumpet, apparently, according to the Quran, mountains will crumble, the sun will darken, the seas will boil, and the stars will begin to collapse on the earth.
Mm. So that's really similar to Christianity as well. As an angel will sound a trumpet that'll be heard throughout the earth.
Really?
So yeah. You know what? I won't live check myself. I could be completely wrong about that. Wait, hold on. Trumpet. I'll live fact check myself. I don't care. Yeah, it's the seven trumpets. It's a huge thing. It's in Revelation. So I knew I wasn't completely baseless in saying that. For some reason, if you want to talk about things like you can, I'm like, it's really weird to think about it this way, but things that can actually happen, I can imagine them happening, like me walking out my door and hearing it. I could totally see experiencing this. Like, imagine you come out and you walk into the world around and you see everything crumbling around you and you hear these sirens that the entire world can hear.
Yeah.
There was a weird, I don't know if it was it could have just been a psyop completely, but there was a brief YouTube trend where people were saying they were hearing trumpets and recording trumpets. Do you remember that? It was about 2 or 3 years ago. It was a weird
Is it like
YouTube thing that
in
was
a
going around.
town in like some flyover state? Like they were hearing
Yeah, they were
trumpets in the
doing
town?
that, but then apparently they said they heard him in St. Petersburg and all these. It was strange, but
Ah.
people. It was a lot of. It was just a weird YouTube thing that came and went during COVID. People probably don't even remember it anymore. But I mean, that's pretty interesting, and I don't hear a lot about Muhammad in that either. It just seems like
Yeah.
it's
So you might
yeah.
be thinking, well, mountains crumbling and the sun sea boiling. That's not really nice for the Muslims left on earth, right? Well,
Mm.
there's an easy way out. So when this angel blows the trumpet, a cold wind will wrap around the world before the blowing of the trumpet, and every righteous believer of Islam will experience this wind and die an instant and peaceful death. So it's going to wrap around the entire world until only unbelievers are left to face the end of the world. And they're going to face the end of the world like mountains crumbling, the seas boiling for a period of 40 years. So
Oh, mano.
that's tough, right? That's so
That's
tough.
tough. That's tough. Tough luck, kid.
Yep. So this continues until the extinction of every living creature on the planet. At which point, a second trumpet is blown and all souls are gathered in one place and resurrected by Allah. So
Mm.
the first group to be resurrected are Muslims, followed by virtuous non-Muslims, and then the non-Muslim people that aren't virtuous. So,
Mm.
but here's the thing: when I say resurrect, you probably think it's going to be instant, right? But it's not going to
Yeah.
be. The Quran says that the time to resurrect all souls will be an insanely long wait. which gives ample time for sinners to stand before
Repent.
God and contemplate their actions. Yeah, God's literally gonna gather all souls to some yard where they're gonna be facing Him and just resurrect people like one by one. So
That, yeah,
that's cool.
good.
What were you gonna say?
Well, I was just going to say that will the wind coming in and giving everyone an instant death. That's kind of like the rapture, where people will supposedly just disappear in the clothes that they're in and be taken to heaven in their angelic bodies. That's a Christian thing too. So it's strange how they put it that way. That's kind of like the angel of death too, that in the biblical story killed every firstborn son in the family during the what was it? Well, the Prince of Egypt movie. It's in the Bible, so it's a classic. Prince of Egypt is such a banger. I have to bring it up, but I can't believe all that. That's nuts. Wait, so if you're what happens if you're a Muslim and you die right now? Or okay, you're not a Muslim and you die right now. Where are you going? You're going to
You go to
hell, right?
Barzakh, the containment realm, and then you get resurrected
Oh, you go
on
to the
Judgment Day.
quarantine realm. Sorry.
Put the mask back on.
Yeah, seriously. All right. Well, I guess I'm heading there, but
I'll see you there, right? Okay,
That's amazing.
but once all souls are resurrected, every living creature and every angel will have to face the blazing sun and sweat for one day until it sets. But here's the thing. How long this day lasts depends on how much sin you've committed. So for sinners and non-believers, this one day is going to last 50,000 years.
Oh,
Oh,
no, dude. That's no good. That's no
yeah,
good for
that's.
business.
I think we're just standing, sweating for like 50,000 years. I'm like, God damn, dude, what the?
You get a glass of water during that? I mean,
Yeah,
that's pretty bad, man. That's pretty
tough.
bad. I mean, that's basically hell, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
no good for
Oh,
business. So.
that's not even hell yet. So after this,
Oh no.
after all this, judgment finally begins, right? So each soul on earth has a book. So angels write into a book. One page equals one day, like all the deeds and virtues and misdeeds that you've done. And every soul has a book. So once judgment begins, if Allah presents the book of your soul to your right hand, it means that He has deemed you worthy of paradise. If He presents it to your left hand, you are deemed to damnation, pretty much.
Mm.
And then once you're given this book, you have to cross every soul. Once they're given a book, they have to cross this thing called the Bridge of Sirat, and it's a bridge to paradise, basically. But but below the bridge is the fire of hell. So follow me on this. If you've been
Okay.
judged worthy as paradise by Allah, the bridge will widen and a wind will come and help you cross it swiftly into paradise. If you've been judged as unworthy of paradise, the bridge will be thinner than the eye of a needle and sharper than a sword, causing you to fall into the fires of hell.
Oh, and then you're stuck?
Yep, you're stuck. You're down in hell forever.
Mm.
Except if you're a Muslim and you get sent to hell, eventually you get to paradise after like
What
your.
if the bridge is really wide and you fall by accident? It's like this wide and like some Indiana Jones. It's like a tightrope scenario.
You
And
just
Allah's
trip like
just
some guy.
like, yeah, he's like, sorry, that's where we're at here. You know what I mean? It's funny you said that about the book. That's a huge thing within Christianity. It's the book of life, the Lamb's book of life. And apparently all our names are written in it for salvation when we're born, and we get blotted out of the book of life, or God already knows we're in the book of life. So when you said that about the book, it's really interesting to me.
Maybe it's
So
the same book that I'm referring to.
I mean, people love to. That's like the old. That's why I'll always hate people. Who's the guy like Richard Dawkins or something? I don't know. Just stupid Ricky Gervais type atheism. It's like, oh, there's all these in the world, and yours just happens to be the right one. And it's like, yeah, it is. So what do you want me to do about it? You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand how that's even an argument. It's like there's thousands of.
Even from like a pragmatic place, if you count all the believers of all the Abrahamic religions, it's like fucking 3 billion people. It's like 3 billion people all talking about like one specific concept shared by all three of them. Like, okay, that's
That's
a
a really good
coincidence.
point. I didn't even
Yeah,
think about it that way. It's like 50 to 60% of Americans alone are Christians, and it's like, oh, and theirs just happens to be right. It's like, well, that's a couple billion people right there. So my thing is more another way to have the argument is you're at a murder trial and someone's on trial for murder, and it's like, wow, there's billions of people in the world, and this guy just happens to be the murderer, just this guy that you've accused, and it's like, well, yeah, it is. I'm sorry. So I don't know. There's so many ways to think about that. It's so funny to me because when it comes to belief, people get so wrapped up in these. I don't even know what to call those. I guess they're just logic puzzle arguments or contradiction traps, and they're not really what the word is about. And I told someone, this is kid, he's probably my age. His dad's a pastor, and he's not. He decided he was an atheist later in life, and we were having a conversation, and I just said, it really does. We're having a very frank conversation. I always said, people try and say, like, well, here's why the earth might be 10,000 years old. And I know we've had conversations about that kind of thing before, but unless you have faith, you can't you can't approach religion from a logical perspective. At the end of the day, it does involve faith and leaps of faith. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to be, you're not going to be able to mesh with their religion. So
I can fully relate to that because for those of you who don't know, I've been trying to become religious for the better part of like 3 years. And, you know, for the better part of 3 years, I've went around and tried to, you know, see, like, read G.K. Chesterton, like the uh, rational
well, he's
belief for
boring,
Christ
but
and all that. And,
yeah.
it's like, I don't, it really, I went nowhere with trying to make myself closer to God until I really just read some beautiful, works of Christ himself, and didn't even bother with like the rational Reddit side. If you try and go down the logical side, it's going to be a rabbit hole that your mind will constantly just like not allow you to pass through.
Yeah. It is tough because the way we used to look at life used to be more ontological in a sense where we looked at science and logic and the pursuit of progressing in life through a medical capacity or bettering ourselves through a lens where we were worshiping God's earth. We were using it as a form of respect. Instead, science has become a denial of scripture and focusing on worship of man when it used to be more about understanding God's nature. And it wasn't, there didn't seem to be conversations about clashing with God's word. I know everyone loves to talk about Ptolemy and like, oh, but this guy said that the earth revolved around the sun and he was killed, blah, blah, blah. There's so much more that goes into the story than just that. He really did continually disrespect strictly governmental papal authorities that really didn't have to do anything with
Yeah.
discernment over the word. It gets so stupid when you look into stuff like that. There was this one book I read. Man, I wish I could remember the name of it. It's actually on my bookshelf, but my bookshelf is just a little bit too far away. It's called like God Scientists or something like that, and it talks about scientific achievements through society of religious men, and that's mainly most of time up until the last 100 years. Maybe is most men who were committing science and dedicating their lives to science were deeply religious, and that's still a lot of the case with a lot of them. But for some reason, it's taking this agnostic.
Yeah, I love how
atheist
people skip over that one little fact. By the way, like these people on Reddit will like say, "Oh, look at this scientific discovery and all that," but then when you point out the fact that, oh, the researcher that uncovered this scientific discovery is Christian and he believes in God, they just skip over that fact straight away. They're like, "Oh, well, that's not really relevant to the conversation."
Exactly. But when they're an atheist, it's totally relevant. They love when it's stupid quotes
Yeah.
about it. They just can't help themselves, obviously. I didn't mean to sidetrack you again there, but I just think it's interesting when you go deeper and deeper in these stories. I'm just like, well, how could a wind blow in and do this? It's faith. I'm sorry, but it's faith. And you either have it or you don't. And I found my faith through looking at my life and the beauty in life around me. I didn't read some book and say like, I have now figured out that God logically exists. Like, that's so stupid. That's so dumb. But people want that now.
I don't think anyone on the planet has like done that thing where like, according according to my calculations, I think it's more probabilistic that God exists. It's like, just
It's according to my calculations, Jesus was able to rise from the dead, and like what are you talking about? It's like, no, I'm totally with you on that one. So well, hopefully you find that someday. Are you still wrapping up Islam, or we're on to anything
just a
else?
quick thing, a quick cool description of what paradise is believed to be in Islam. Paradise is apparently a land of beautiful gardens flowing with rivers of milk, honey, and wine. So paradise has it's full of palaces and mansions, each made of gold and silver, adorned with beautiful furnishings and decorations. It's also a meeting place for you to reunite with all your loved ones, and the standard, like, it's a place of eternal youth, good health, and fulfillment beyond anything describable on Earth.
That's nice. It's funny that you
Yeah.
say honey. Honey is just honey is their version of some like Willy Wonka stuff in these stories. The Bible's all about it too. Honey and wine. They
Yeah.
can't get enough of it. They love their honey. It's low in calorie, and I'm sure it tastes good. But back then, what are you eating that's sweet? That's not honey. You know what I mean?
But
Fruit.
I bet honey in heaven probably tastes like beyond what a Coke Zero does taste on Earth, right?
I don't know. Coke Zero is pretty good.
Well,
It's
it's
a
my
tough
favorite
one.
beverage, so
I like the one people don't talk about this enough. So if you ever played, sound like a nerd. If you ever played an RPG of any kind, you might be familiar with the term mana. Mana. Oh man, I'm out of mana. I think we talk about that when we play League. That's a biblical term. There's
manna from
mana in
heaven,
heaven.
right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So when people talk about honey or food in heaven, it always makes me think of mana. So, and they'd be feasting on that. When I think of mana, I think of like some gold liquid that you can pick up in your hands and you eat it, and it like can be in like a spherical shape. And it's just really good. It just tastes really good. Like that's some Willy Wonka stuff.
That's
right
the same
there.
as the Greeks believed. They believed, like, all the gods, they subsisted on this liquid called ambrosia. That's what made them gods, apparently. This golden
Oh,
liquid.
well, that's cheating that they were doing that. We'll have to do that.
That's
We
cheating.
could do man, that's if we ever talk about this again, we should do Egyptian afterlife and things like that,
That would be
like
cool. Yeah,
Horus and all that kind of
like the
stuff.
ancient mythologies.
Yeah, yeah. But you can do that stuff forever. And honestly, it's mostly the same story over and over in a lot of cases. So but all right, we'll keep it rolling. I got one more. We got one
Yeah,
more in the bag
best
here.
for last, some would say.
So we're going to talk about Judaism and the Judaic
Boo.
afterlife. Yeah. Our Black Israelite audience's heads just perked up. They're really ready for this. They're making sure I don't get anything wrong here. So I guess in order to understand the Jewish afterlife, you'd have to first understand what they're moving towards, what the end goal of their faith is, and it's the age of the Messiah. Because as we all know, Jews don't believe that, and they certainly did their best to get rid of him. Is they don't believe that Christ is the Messiah. They don't believe he's the Son of God. They're still waiting for him, and it's interesting because the Pharisees at the time had tons of power, and they didn't seem to want to give it up when Christ showed up. And something tells me if another one were to come along, they wouldn't want to give up their power again either. But that's not something that we'll be talking about at this moment. So the age of the Messiah, and maybe is this how you say this? Olam haba.
Yep.
Jews believe in a future era of peace, prosperity, and spiritual reconnection with God. In this golden era, the Jewish righteousness will be resurrected, or the Jewish righteous, the people who are righteous that died in this time will be resurrected. The world will be transformed in a state of perfection and harmony. Those who have died will be brought back to life in a purified state. So they're coming back locked and loaded.
Yeah,
Evil and suffering.
They're coming back wearing the yarmulke. That's like their purification.
They're coming back for their yarmulke, and they're coming back for your bitch. That's what they're coming back for. It says evil and suffering will be eliminated, and entrance is granted to those who have had a righteous life and fulfilled the obligations associated with Judaism. So until this age of the Messiah comes to fruition, where are they going until then? Because a Christian believes that because Christ died, he's able to give us the key to salvation, which is heaven, by forgiving our sins. But for now, because the covenant has not been fulfilled in Jewish culture, righteous Jewish souls who pass away before the age of Messiah will reside in the spiritual realm of Eden. This is so interesting. Characteristics of Eden: it's free from suffering and pain, a place of deep intellectual and spiritual growth where souls study and deepen their understanding of the divine. That's kind of in line with what I said about Swedenborgian heaven, in the second level of
Mm.
Swedenborgian heaven, where it's academic in nature, which is so interesting that they put like a studious spin on getting into heaven. And I guess that was maybe, whether this stuff is true or not, that might have been people's ideas of what a righteous life would be, one where you're studying and trying to better yourself and
Mm.
understand God's creation for all eternity. That's someone's idea of a good time for all eternity back then. So for me, it would be playing League.
Just endless tests.
That would be hell,
in
actually.
heaven.
Yeah. Yeah. What if you're in heaven and it's like, oh man, I forgot my test notes or something. God just quizzing you. It's like, okay, well, I won't go too far with it. I don't want to get sacrilegious. So they're not going to be there forever. I mean, supposedly when the covenant is fulfilled in the Jewish sense, we'll be sent to earth. They'll be sent back from there to earth when the age of the Messiah arrives. And that, I'm assuming, that's when judgment will be going on earth. So it really is death, resurrection through the new Messiah. It's almost like an inverse. It's like an inverse of Christianity, when where you die, you go to heaven. And this, when the Messiah fulfills the covenant, you go from heaven to earth in a perfect body. That's interesting to me.
Inverse in more ways than one. So it's
yeah, well, yeah, we'll take it easy. Listen, I'm taking a lot of there's a lot of generous liberties I'm taking right now in this particular subject about this particular people. So we'll say what happens to the bad ones. Unrighteous souls who pass away before the age of the Messiah are sent to purgatory. So they got a purgatory, they got a purification process. Souls are tormented as a consequence of their actions on earth until they are truly repentful, or have corrected past spiritual wrongdoings and are worthy of ascending to a higher level of existence. They proceed to the rest of the souls on earth during the age of the Messiah. So they get to go there anyways, too.
Yep.
We're all going to the
It's
age
a
of Messiah
win-win.
no matter what. Yeah,
No,
serious.
but here's a stipulation. It's only the people that have faith in Judaism that get a win-win situation. So for the rest of us who don't believe in Judaism, we're in this hellish purgatory until we realize that Judaism is the one true religion. Apparently,
they force us. That's like the paradigm that people have with torture and why it doesn't work, because they'll give you an answer regardless. It's like, hey, believe in Judaism or you're stuck. It's like, well, if they're sticking me in their purgatory after I'm dead, I'm probably going to be inclined to believe that they're the real deal. There's nothing I can do about it at that point. So that's like a messed up Pascal's wager or something. Pascal's not a fan of that one, we'll just say. So, well, all right, good for them. A lot more generous than I thought they would be. So, a lot more generous I thought they would be about the afterlife. So, yeah. That's a lot of good subjects, man. You brought some good ones to the table.
It's just funny that that the Pharisees were like the Jews at the time. They saw Christ rise up from the dead after 3 days, and they're like, "No, I still don't think he's the Messiah. Yeah, there's something off about this." You know?
Yeah, there's something off about this. Anyways, that loan payment's due. I need to stick around.
What are we doing for lunch?
Oh, this hummus. All right, I can't keep doing it again. I'll let it go. You got anything else to say? I got a little bit of a bonus round, actually, before we wrap it up here. I always thought this was funny, going back to Christianity, and I'll rag on my one Orthodox friend about it, is that apparently part of the process, and this isn't a widely held Orthodox belief, some would say it originally stems from Christian Gnosticism. Have you ever heard of the concept of toll houses?
No, what's that?
So, and it reminds me of some dumb book I read when I was in elementary school called The Phantom Toll Booth, which is an absolute OG banger. If you ever want to read that book, give it to your kid or something like that. But I'll just strip this from Wikipedia, because anything I would say wouldn't do justice for it. It's called an aerial toll house, AERIAL toll house. Aerial toll houses are a belief held by some in the Eastern Orthodox Church, which states, following a person's death, the soul leaves the body and is escorted to God by angels. Okay, we're doing well so far.
Cool.
During this journey, good, everything's good. During this journey, the soul passes through an aerial realm which is inhabited by wicked spirits. Interesting. The soul encounters these demons at various points referred to as toll houses. Okay, so they're toll house demons. We're like, it's like a Dark Souls boss, like a toll house with arms or something. It's stupid. Where the demons then attempt to accuse it of sin and if possible, drag the soul into hell. So that's it. So imagine you die and you're floating up and Angel's like, all right, come on, we got to get up here. And you're seeing these weird, I don't know, toll house demons coming trying to grab your soul and be like, remember that time you stole the airhead from that 5 and dime and then you returned it? Remember that time that you cheated on that girl you dated? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So they'll just try and grab you and take you back down to hell.
If that was me, I'd be like grabbing on the angel and like looking at him and be like, dude, are you gonna do anything about these guys? Or
yeah, well, I would grab and be like, look, you're the one who can get up there. So if I'm going, you're going. I don't know what to tell you about this. And the angel's like, he can't do anything about it. He doesn't want to go down there. So so I always bring up the toll houses whenever Orthodox Christianity comes up. I'm like, yeah, well, what do you feel about the toll houses? And they never know what I'm talking about. So whatever. But I'll conclude us now, Tyson. I had fun. It felt nice to be scripted for a little bit, and maybe someday when we get a subject up here that interests other people that have done this podcast with us before, they'd want to come in and talk about it too. So, but yeah, until next time, until the next subject, what else do you have going on that you think is interesting that you think you want to talk about another time?
Let me know in the comments if you guys find the following topics interesting. But I was thinking of doing like a deep dive on time travel and like different like experiences and theories and all that stuff. I would love to do like a deep dive on time travel episode.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Well, you can do that on your own. I hate time travel. It bothers me so much when they do it. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan, but I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind talking about it. So
I also have this one about like medieval and Victorian era prisons, like what it would be to live the life as a prisoner in the medieval times.
There's this one book, one of the greatest books I've ever read in my young adult career. It's called Cross Section Castles. Let me make sure the name is correct. Cross Section Castles. Yeah, it's still out, and it's still an absolute like top of the line banger book. And there's a section of a castle called a forget-me-not where if someone's like, you're just dead, like you're done, they just tuck you into this little area, lock the door, and you're just stuck laying there until you die. They don't feed you or anything, and you just sit there until you die. Yeah, they're nasty back then, man. That's feudalism. It's good stuff. But yeah, if you guys like what we were doing, let us know. Again, I want to do an episode on Amazon and some other stuff that I feel like I need to talk about that I've always been interested in. But I liked Tyson's subject today, especially since I knew a little bit about it already, because I'm an okay Christian, and I try to be studied on some of the other stuff. So I guess Tyson's going to convert to Islam. So good luck.
But yeah, thanks guys. And let us know how you feel about this episode in the comments. See ya.
All right. Later.